All right, let's go ahead and get started. To everyone tuning in from around the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very exciting event planned. And as you can see, we have a prestigious group from across both the US and UK who will be sharing their unique insights on the Allied Defense Innovation ecosystem. I'm Lindsay Pauley, and I manage our government defense accounts here at Starburst. So I spend most of my day interacting with our defense clients, trying to understand where they are, where they want to go, and the capability needs they need in order to make that leap. And with that knowledge, we provide in-depth guidance on not only the newest market trends, but also on startups from around the world that have been identified by Starburst's scouting team as the most unique and impactful aerospace and defense startups out there. The end goal is to not only help our defense clients achieve their mission, but to do so with cutting edge capabilities by connecting them with startups who are already developing them. Across the defense sector as a whole, we're seeing the launch of new initiatives intended to foster this type of partnering, not only domestically, but also in the context of the broader international defense ecosystem. So today is a chance for all of you to hear about how this ecosystem is evolving from industry experts. Before I pass the mic, I'm going to do a quick run through of today's agenda. First, we'll have the privilege of hearing from Brigadier General Cawthorn, excuse me, the Vice Commander of SNC, as well as Dr. O'Callaghan with DSTL Space. Then in our roundtable discussion, we'll hear from leaders representing DSTL Space, SNC's Chief Partnership Office, Seraphim Capital, Royal Air Force's Deputy Assistant Chief of Staff for Space, and Raytheon UK. And after the roundtable, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll ask our panel questions from the audience. So make sure you use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and tell me which panelist you'd like your question directed to. You can add questions throughout the entire event and make sure to use the upvote feature so we can ask the top question on everyone's minds. And without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic to Starburst's co-founder, Van Espabodi.
Thank you, Lindsay. Mic check. All right. Welcome, everyone. For those of you that have met me before, my name is Van. I haven't met me before. My name is Van Espabodi. I'm the co-founder of Starburst. This is the about 10th event that we've hosted since we've pivoted to a virtual environment with the onset of COVID in mid-March. It's hard to believe we're 4 months into the sort of new business dynamic. I know a lot of us have been working to a point where we've realized what becomes home and what becomes time at work. But I just want to thank everyone for participating in today's event. This event is particularly close to me. As many of you may not know, I spent more than half of my career based in the UK, as well as before that growing up in the US. And particularly, I've spent all my career thinking about how technology transfer moves between countries, in particular in how the UK and the US have been championing that. There's no secret that the two countries have shared a historic bond, and we've been working tirelessly with many of the stakeholders you're going to hear from today to think about how we continue to drive what Starburst really believes in around letting everyone be good at what they're great at. In particular, how do startups and entrepreneurs that are creating these new innovations and these technologies into the market to bring that energy together and work with industry, work with operators, work with the supply chain, and continue to bring in capital from unexpected places to grow their businesses. Many of you are aware that we've seen record investments and timelines in how these companies have gone from less than 5 co-founders to being a company worth over $1 billion in just under 3 years. And the commercial space industry has seen incredible growth in the last few years. So we're very privileged to bring in experts to share their insights on some of those developments, and as well as how some of those developments have surprised us and during this kind of time of post-pandemic type environment. So we've seen companies make incredible decisions and continue to grow. We've seen some companies struggle and consolidate. These are certainly interesting times, but I'll leave it to the experts to discuss. I just want to say thank you all for joining. Today's audience is up to 200. We had almost 400 people register, so I'm sure there'll be more from industry, from the investment community, from the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not just in the US and the UK, but from other parts of the world. As you know, Starburst is active in over 10 countries now, and we scout about 2,000 startups per year that we find is relevant to the future of aviation, space, and defense. So today's panel, before we go into it, as Lindsay mentioned, I'd like to invite Vice Commander Cawthorn to show his video, just to show me that it's working. I know we've all been playing with Zoom features. Welcome. Very good. Thank you. So we have the honor of being joined by the Brigadier General Cawthorn from Space and Missile Systems Center, which is Space Force's procurement entity and acquisition arm. So I'll let him kind of share a little bit more about what's going on at SMC and why partnerships and how we continue to push for innovation in space with the commercial industry is critical to the future of the space warfighter. So with that, it looks like the camera is good. And I'll invite you to unmute yourself and share with us how things are going on your side. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Van and Lindsay. Appreciate Starburst and you guys hosting this event. Very important time as we're moving forward. I'd like to echo Lindsay's welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be joining us from in these interesting times, right? And I'm glad to see that we're able to continue to move forward, even in the midst of this global pandemic that we're all working to deal with. So I am Brigadier General Jason Cawthorn. I'm a relatively new here in my role as the Vice Commander at the Space and Missile Systems Center, which for those who might not be aware is our U.S. Space Force's primary acquisition center, and we're located here in Los Angeles, California. As Van said, the U.S. has a proud history and partnership with our UK and our European allies, and that's one of the greatest strengths that we have. And our country's focus on tenacity and creativity and solving hard problems is what has served us well in the past and will continue to serve us well in the future. So I'm glad everyone's joining me here today as we continue that legacy of innovation and international collaboration. And we're here looking for visionary partners to whom or with whom we can establish strategic and long-term relationships to tackle those challenges we're all facing in this complex and dynamic environment that we're living in. Some ways in order to address this complex and challenging dynamic space environment, the United States has established the United States Space Force last year in December 2019. That's going to enable our U.S. Department of Defense to take a clean sheet approach to how the U.S. approaches military space. General Raymond, our first Chief of Space Operations, is focused on doing things different, driving lean, flat, mission-focused organization that has the agility needed to ensure freedom of movement and to deter aggression in, from, and through space. On June 30th of this year, our Secretary of the Air Force and Chief of Space Operations discussed some additional details on the future of this U.S. Space Force organization. Part of this is again, looking to stand up lean, flat, agile field commands. 3 of those field commands, one focused on operations, one focused on acquisition, and one focused on test and training. Acquisitions will fall to what is going to be known as the Space Systems Command. Work on that stand-up is still in progress, but we would expect acquisition and development organizations to include the Space and Missile Systems Center, the Commercial Satellite Communications Office, and other space systems program offices that may be transferring to the U.S. Space Force in the future will be the building blocks that form this new Space Systems Command. This comes on the heels of a reorganization that we here at SMC just finished last November, which was called SMC 2.0. This is the largest reorganization that we've done here in about 65 years, which is quite a long time since we took a clean look at this. And again, the focus of that was evolving this organization into a more flat and agile organization, taking an enterprise approach, looking at space acquisitions, focusing on partnerships and innovation as key tenets to that reorganization, and changing the culture here of doing business, all while increasing speed and agility, something that we've called epic speed here. As part of SMC 2.0, our commander, Lieutenant General J.T. Thompson, created the innovation and partnership teams focused on seeking innovative technologies and solutions, growing our allied interagency and commercial partnerships. So this US-UK Virtual Innovation Roundtable is a great example of just how successful we're becoming here at SMC in seeking innovation and partnerships. What I'd like to do is to give you an idea of how we have turned our focus and where we are on innovation and partnerships. I'd like to point to two recent examples. So one is an innovative tool we've been using here to attract new partnerships in the US through a thing called the Space Enterprise Consortium, or SPEC. We've established that to facilitate accelerated prototype development through a medium that increases collaboration between the US government and commercial partners. SPEC also encourages partnerships and cooperation through traditional defense contractors, but is more focused on non-traditional vendors such as small businesses and academic institutions. Currently, this SPEC consists of 396 partners developing that next generation of space technology, and about 80% of those 396 partners are non-traditional vendors. So far, with using this vehicle, we've yielded over a third reduction in timeline to get requirements awarded, which I know are keen to startup and small businesses getting those awards in a timely manner. And due to the overwhelming success we've seen with SPEC, we are working on a follow-on consortium called SPEC Reloaded, and that's planned to be awarded next month in August. The second example I'd like to point to of innovation was our first ever U.S. Air Force Space Pitch Day that we did back last November. That's where we and SMC utilized a revitalized approach to our Small Business Innovative Research Fund. And this Air Force Space Pitch Day resulted in about 30 Phase 2 awards for a total of around $47 million over this two-day event, featuring same-day award and payment. Companies were primarily sourced from proposals that we put out to the community and participated in approximately a 13-week customer discovery where we identified end users and customers from various components within the U.S. Space Force and the U.S. Air Force. This work featured heavy buy-in from a newly developed combat development divisions, which are our direct tie-in to the operators' needs and the challenges that they face. This two-day event included a number of guest speakers like the Secretary of the Air Force, Barbara Barrett, and Elon Musk. We had nearly 1,000 people attend this, with 60 companies participating in an expo floor. And they were also hosting open door pitches outside the main event. And so this was a great success, first ever, but we're not stopping there, right? We're continuing efforts for a second U.S. Space Pitch Day, and we'll be publishing more information about that in the future. But so here we are today, right? Continuing this focus on innovation and partnerships in this International Space Pitch Day virtual roundtable. I'm sure you've seen the UK Ministry of Defense and the US Department of Defense announced yesterday the virtual kickoff of this first ever International Space Pitch Day. Truly an innovative partnership. We see this as the first of many to come of International Space Pitch Days, and we're honored to be charting this new course with UK, one of our longest and closest allies. It's just one more way that we're working to strengthen space alliances and working to demonstrate to industry around the world that we're willing and able to work together to find the best space technologies to meet our coalition needs. The Space Pitch Day effort allowed our space operators from the U.S. Space Command and the UK Ministry of Defense to jointly contribute to the problem sets that we're going to be soliciting for award. Our innovation and partnerships are breaking new ground with this event, right? First ever, as the UK will be contracting on behalf of the US, while the US will be conducting the background due diligence on the selectees. And this shared services means shared responsibility and just works to strengthen our relationship. So I'd like to close with a few thoughts. Today, it's clear we face different realities in this space domain than we ever have. To ensure we're ready to face this new reality, we've got to embrace a culture of smart risk-taking and empowered program execution. And the progress we're making in space innovation and partnerships is truly remarkable. Lots of firsts in the last year alone. This is a unique and most exciting time to be in the space business. And to be clear, winning the future will be dependent on how quickly we can innovate and not only how quickly we innovate, who we innovate with and who we bring to the fight with us. The vision can't be accomplished by the US alone. There is clearly an imperative for us to work together. Together with our closest partners and allies, we are making historic leaps to secure space superiority for all of our nations. So we here at SMC are focused on creating a space acquisition ecosystem that doesn't just support partnerships between SMC and industry, but also encourages intra-agency, interagency, intra-industry, and international partnerships. The systems and architectures we're pursuing right now and in the foreseeable future have to be designed with connectivity from the very beginning. So we must drive innovation into these systems to ensure we're ready to face the challenges of this new space domain that is no longer benign. We face a host of significant threats and ever-advancing threats. So we here are empowering our teams to own their decisions in order to get the capabilities into our joint and coalition warfighter hands. And we're doing that, we have to do that at the speed to pace the threats. So we can deter conflict from spreading into the space domain, which nobody wants. But if it does, we got to be ready and willing to defend the ultimate high ground should it become necessary. So once again, thank you to Starburst for hosting this. Thank you to our UK partners and our European allies as we move forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And in the spirit of the new motto of the United States Space Force, Semper Supra.
Very cool. Thank you, General Cawthorn. Yeah, we really appreciate those opening remarks. I think you touched on some critical points. I think people tend to forget the history of GPS, where it came from, and the effect it's had on our society. And now with all the innovations going on, we're really excited to continue to push ahead. So we thank you for your support, yeah, we'll be in touch soon.
I appreciate it. Look forward to working with everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day. With that, I'll invite Dr. Michael Callaghan from DSTL. So we've invited Mike to also share some opening remarks around how our friends across the pond are thinking about the same topics that were just brought up. So I'll hand it over to you, Mike, to share some words, please.
Thanks very much. And firstly, thanks to General Cawthorn for those words. Very exciting to see what's going on in the US. Difficult act to follow in terms of where we're coming from in the UK at the moment, and certainly we're coming at this with a similar but slightly different perspective as you would expect. Firstly, I'd like to pass on apologies from Air Vice Marshal Harv Smith, who unfortunately couldn't make it at the last minute to deliver the keynote from the UK today. But I'll certainly be reflecting a few of the points that Harv would have made. In terms of my own role, I work for the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, which is the research arm of the Ministry of Defence. And I've been leading our space science and technology program since 2017. But my background before that is very much in what we call the C4 ISR domain. That's communications, information, and intelligence. So space very much a part of that wider communications and information and intelligence domain. And I would say if I look at what's been going on over the last few weeks or months, it's really exciting actually to be here. It's the culmination in a way of some initiatives, some work we've been trying to do over the last 2 or 3 years within the space program at DSTL to start getting after new ways of working, to start getting after different ways in which we can engage with the supply chain, with industry, with academia, and different ways in which we can work with our close allies and partners, in this case, the US, but extending to Five Eyes, to NATO, and to others. And I'm sure you're aware from things that have been going on in the press, from announcements that you've seen, that space is an area of increasing interest in the UK, and increasing recognition of the reliance that we have on the space domain from a military perspective. And I'm talking about that journey that we've been on, and I look back and it's funny how getting to these points can sometimes be a long and slightly tortuous journey. And General Cawthorn talked about the International Space Pitch Day, which you have seen announced yesterday. And really that journey started back in 2018 at a chance conversation I had at the US Space Symposium, when I got introduced to a bright young officer from the US Air Force called Jake Singleton, who's doing some great stuff over in the US around innovation. And I was pleased to say that over the course of a few years, I was able to bring Jake over to the UK to work on secondment for us here at DSTL, and he's been doing that for the last year. And I think it speaks to leadership and tenacity that's required to get these new ways of working up and running. And it highlights to me that we mustn't be constrained by any outdated or legacy thinking in the ways in which we want to approach different ways of procurement, different ways of doing research, different ways of pulling stuff through. And within DSTL, we've been trying to look at a variety of different approaches to doing that. We've worked through our traditional partnerships with our prime space industry, through a consortia we put together. Those in the UK might be familiar with arrangements such as Serapis, which is one of our primary R&D frameworks. The Defence and Security Accelerator are a key part of the International Space Pitch Day, and we'll be bringing together the UK and US investment to try and look at some of those early stage startups, bringing it together with user problems to see where we can get to. We've also got new parts of UK government as well, looking at different ways of investing, such as the National Security Strategic Investment Fund, or NSIF, which many of you might not be aware of. But again, a new way of looking at how we do almost a corporate venture investment in early stage companies to try and move things forward. So as we seek to explore some of these new ways of doing business, we need to also understand how as we grow our space investment, what that ecosystem is going to look like, and how we can pull some of those really good ideas through into programs of record, into procurement as well. And we're starting from quite a low base within the space domain, but that's actually a really good thing as well. Within the UK, we've got quite a greenfield site in terms of space capability. We aren't too constrained by legacy systems or legacy programs. So we can examine these different mechanisms, these different ways of working, and look at how we might be able to build those into some of our future procurement mechanisms as well. So that's very exciting. And I know that's something that's very much on the radar of AVM Half-Smith as well, and something that he would have spoken to today. And we've been successful as well. I think, I look at the scale of what General Cawthorn talked to earlier, and it's great to see the scale of that investment in the US and how they're really energizing the space sector. But we've seen some great success as well within our sort of science and technology investment within DSTL. We first ran a space-focused traditional company competition, a bit like the US SBIR process back in 2015. We only funded 10 or 12 companies, but a couple of those companies out of that original competition, we saw get commercial investment. We saw them scale up their business. One of those companies, Vert Rotors, looking at some really interesting novel biocooler technology out of Scotland. And we saw them off the back of that investment from the Ministry of Defence start to attract additional investment. So we start to see that there was really good leverage to be had between where we might choose to put our money and where commercial companies might be interested, or commercial investment funds might be interested, certainly in the space domain. We're now in the middle of another competition through the Defence and Security Accelerator. We're kind of halfway through that, and I know some of those companies have been struggling during the COVID situation, but it's been really great actually to see how those companies have continued to deliver those projects. And we've seen some great work again from companies like Oxford Space Systems, based in Oxfordshire, looking at deployable structures in space to understand how we might be able to protect low Earth orbit satellites in the future, through to companies that came through the Seraphim Space Camp. BioWare was one such company who were part of Seraphim Space Camp a couple of years ago, and out the back of that got funding through the Defense and Security Accelerator through one of our competitions, looking at orbital agility, control moment gyroscope assemblies. So again, our work that we've been doing with Seraphim Space Camp has fed through into some of our competitions. So we're seeing that mixing up, that bleeding across from VC investment, from commercial investment into defense investment. So as I mentioned, we need to continue to understand, with all these initiatives, exploring these new ways of working, how we can procure space better, faster in the future. I know the General spoke to that about speed to innovate, about how we can more quickly pull through technologies. And we've seen that already in the UK with work we've done as well with companies like Surrey Satellite Technologies Limited, where we went from sort of design to orbit in just over 12 months. With the Carbonite 2 platform a few years ago. So we've explored some of that agility, some of those new ways of working already, and now we need to look at how we could scale that more. So in terms of summing up in this panel, trying to bring expertise from the UK and the US together, for us that international interoperability, working with allies and partners, is absolutely critical to the future direction of our space program. Certainly in the research domain, is critical. In fact, it's fundamental to what we do already. Almost all of our projects within the STL space program are collaborative, either with international partners, industry, or academia. So that's really super important to us. And this, the International Space Pitch Day, is launched yesterday, is just another step on trying to deepen those partnerships, deepen those new ways of working, and explore how they might be successful. So I look forward to sitting on the panel in a few minutes' time, and be very happy to take your questions.
Mike, if you're okay with it, we'll save the questions until after the panel.
Sure, absolutely.
I think what we realize is people already want to reach out to you. So what I'm going to do is we'll make sure that after the event, we'll include not people's contact information, but we'll just kind of make sure that they know what your profile is and the programs that you highlighted, that we'll be referring to them, and make sure people have access if they want to participate in some of the competitions you referenced. So thank you. With that, may I invite, thank you, Mike, for the great opening remarks and sharing kind of the counter perspective. I also would like to share kudos to working with Captain Singleton. We really appreciate his leadership and demonstrating, taking this concept of what we started with many years ago to what is now International Space Pitch Day. So with that, I just want to say thank you again to our panelists for joining. May I invite you all to show your screens, and I'll have you all introduce yourselves. But before I do, I just want to thank again to our sponsors at Raytheon Intelligence and Space. They've been very helpful in helping us organize events like this in the past. Again, as I mentioned, we've been doing virtual roundtables for the last 4 months, covering a wide range of topics, from interviewing defense innovation leaders in other countries like France and Israel, in Germany, in Spain, and many other components of civil and defense in the US. So thank you again. Group Captain Raina Owens, I'm just going to double check and see if you're able to share your screen. There you are. Welcome. Okay. Very cool. So with that, I think some of you have a better understanding of kind of the role of what Space Force is developing, where we are. And maybe I'm going to ask each of you to kind of go around and introduce yourselves. Deanna, actually, could I please ask you to go first and introduce the role of Chief Partnerships that General Cawthorn was referring to? That'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Good day to everybody. It's great to look at the panelists on the screen. It's great to see some of my friends and colleagues who we haven't seen each other for several months in the current environment. So hello, everybody. Yeah, let me follow on to what Brigadier General Cawthorn talked about. He mentioned our reorganizational and restructure that we did at Space Missile Systems Center that completed last year. One of the things that Lieutenant General John Thompson wanted to make sure we did was put a focus on partnerships and innovation as a part of this building the future of space enterprise and space ecosystem. So one of the new positions that General Thompson created is the Chief Partnership Office and the Chief Partnership Officer. So that's my role at Space and Missile Systems Center. And as a part of building those relationships, we wanted to have an organization that was wholly focused on building partnerships with our allies, with our interagency, other governmental partners, and with our industry partners. And we have a long running history with our traditional industry partners, but we really wanted to put a focal point on finding out how to engage better with our new technology companies that are coming into the space domain, how to work with non-traditional partners that we normally wouldn't figure out how to reach out to, and then how do we bring all of those capabilities together to our coalition partners and our friends like the UK who are here with us today, so that we can start to look at how to acquire space systems that are really taking advantage of the greatest and best technologies that are out there in the world. We see pockets of innovation and pockets of technology development happening in the smallest corners in the smallest places. And without help of companies like Starburst to help us identify where those companies exist, we wouldn't know where to go find those groups. So again, my role at SMC is really to be on the lookout for those emerging opportunities, to make sure we're tying closely together with our coalition partners as we're building out the space enterprise architecture, and we're starting to identify where those opportunities are to invest in new technologies and innovative thinking. How do we do that as a coalition, and how do we help forge together the opportunities within the United States, within the United States Space Force, but then with our coalition partners and allies. So as we're building out this broad space enterprise, we've got the best of all of the capabilities that are going to help us all be successful if we ever should have to extend conflict into space, which none of us want, but we want to be prepared to do so. So again, that's my role. General Thompson considers me sort of the single point of contact for entry into Space and Missile Systems Center. If you don't know who to call me, and Van can help you get in touch with me or the team, and we'll get you plugged into all of the right people. So I'm really excited to be here today. Happy to be a part of this panel. Looking forward to the discussions as we go forward, and we'll take any questions as they come along. So thanks for the invite, Van, and back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, just to remind everyone, so Deanna, Ms. Riles is the Chief Partnerships Officer at Space and Missile Systems Center, and we will make sure that we follow up and share what her bio is with everyone else. We're also joined with Group Captain Raina Owens. Maybe please share a few words about yourself and your role.
Thanks very much, Van, and good to see a few colleagues, as Deanna says, that we haven't seen for a while, and we're even coordinating our outfit. So please don't let what I'm wearing throw you off the scent. I am a group captain in the Royal Air Force. I'm a little bit unusual in Air Force, I guess, in that I've now been doing space for 10 years. While we in the UK have done space traditionally in the military for an awfully long time, we've not necessarily consciously done that. So my experience spans from being the base commander for RAF Fylingdales, our space radar, to work in the Ministry of Defence. So I've had a little bit of a hand in a lot of the changes you've seen happening in the last few years. My current role, so I'm Air Force, Headquarters Air Force, and I do space capability development, delivery and force development. So I do all of our sort of capability disciplines. And in the 2 years I've been in post, I've grown my team from 2, which used to do BMD in space. I've now got 10, including a couple of folk in the US, one at the CSPOC at Vandenberg, and we're very excited to be finalising details for my test pilot who's going to be working with Virgin Orbit. So it's a growth industry from our perspective. Taken a while for folk to wake up and understand how important space is in the UK, but that's a journey every nation has been on. And I would even say our US colleagues haven't necessarily got all the answers either. So the UK journey, the last 10 years, and it has accelerated over the last 5 years. Mike mentioned previously carbonite. That was Air Force's first foray into really getting under the skin of these things. And as he said, it was a rapid development and all the way through to launch, and it sort of whetted our appetite. At the moment, I'm working in a few areas, a demonstrator to look at ISR and responsive launch. And I'm also trying to do some work to update our Space Operations Centre. But I very much come from the mold of trying to do things a bit differently. So I would say a lot of the work that I'm trying to drive is a foot in the conventional camp, and then a foot in the how do we do things differently? How do we access different opportunities? How do we understand what is out there that we can utilize? Collaboration is a cornerstone of what we do in space because nobody can do it on their own. And we've been very fortunate to work with US and other partners for a number of years, collaborating in what we do. So I'm excited, and having tracked the Space Pitch Day and the developments in the US, excited to have a go now. I recognize that we're kind of new to this. So I think it's going to be a voyage of discovery for all of us, but really excited to take part in the activities. So I think that's probably Van good as a bit of a scene setter for me.
Lovely. Thank you so much. It's a perfect segue to Mark. I want to just, before I ask him to introduce himself, say how proud we are of what he's built over the last few years. Mark and I met, I think it was like 4 years ago at a Reinventing Space conference in Oxfordshire. And we're really excited to have you here today. And you've been wonderful at sharing insights around what you've seen in the commercial space investments community. As a reminder, attendees are up to 240 almost, and I'd say half come from the investment community. So please, Mark, tell us about yourself and your background and what's been going on with you at Seraphim.
Great. Well, thank you for the kind introduction there, Van, and it's a pleasure to be here speaking at this roundtable today. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Seraphim. So I'm a venture capitalist focused exclusively on the space tech market. So we currently have a $90 million VC fund, Seraphim Space, an accelerator program that Mike O'Callaghan mentioned because they're the sponsors of it, called Seraphim Space Camp Accelerator. We have our own angel platform, UK Space Tech Angels. So we're also backed in our venture fund by some of the leading space corporates, which include the likes of Airbus, SES, and Telespazio. So across these three initiatives, we've built up a portfolio of 60 companies. And within the Space Fund, we've backed a range of exciting businesses, including 5 constellations, a small SAR constellation called ISI, weather constellation called Spire Global, a LEO GPS constellation called Zona Space, a quantum communication constellation called ARKIT, and a SATCOMS constellation called AST in Science. So others in our portfolio include LEO Labs, the space situational awareness business, a space taxi, D-Orbit, and a SAR data analytics company called Planet Watchers. So we see about 2,000 space-related investment opportunities a year. And as Raina said, collaboration is absolutely key in this market. We're collaborating with space agencies, we're collaborating with other investors, we're collaborating with corporates in the market. It's really important that everybody works together to bring forward these exciting technologies. And it's great to see now the defense and intelligence communities on both sides of the pond really leaning into this market and working with these exciting startups. Thank you, Mark.
Great. And so with that, I'll invite our final panelist, Paul, from Raytheon in the UK. Paul, I think you bring an interesting mix as you've been involved in a lot of these innovation activities, as well as bringing some familiarity of how it's worked on the cyber domain and how we're seeing that translate into the space domain. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Firstly, thanks for putting this on today. I think just looking at the panelists ahead of me here, you can see there's a real nexus forming, and it's exciting. And it's exciting for a couple of reasons. Firstly, for us as a company, as Raytheon UK, we're obviously part of a much bigger Raytheon Technologies Corporation business. And when I look across at my colleagues across the pond there, the depth of expertise they've got in history and heritage and space across all parts of the value chain is massive. So to be able to sit here and see how do we harness that and bring the best of that across to the UK for this emerging space market, and particularly the defence space market, is an exciting time. And for us to be doing that in concert with innovation and the funds that we've got in the innovators and the startups is a fantastic opportunity. It's something that we're almost starting that journey out with them as well, because the beauty of Raytheon UK being a sovereign landed company is that we're in this position where we can bridge both sides of the Atlantic. And I think that's very much what we're at with this, and seeing how we can benefit from RTX's relationship with Starburst, with AFRL, with SMC, how we can benefit from that in the UK, how we can not duplicate dollars and pounds spent, but how we can actually really concentrate on those areas that is going to benefit the coalition going forward as this becomes much more of an operational domain for the UK Armed Forces. So it's really exciting in that capacity. For myself, having been involved in the UK Defence Solutions Centre and the Defence Growth Partnership, we've looked at how you can actually start to bring together government and industry and academia and try and harness the best of all of those three environments to move technology forwards. And it's really when you get those three coming together that you accelerate. And I think that really is the exciting thing with what I'm seeing in front of me here. In terms of what we're doing now, from the UK perspective, we've kind of gone through this journey, as you were saying earlier, with cyber and establishing where we are. There are a lot of parallels there with a vibrant ecosystem of smaller companies, fast-paced, fast-moving, and that sort of agile development methodology and process, and being able to take that into a traditional aerospace area and try and get those benefits that come from that approach. Typically, you see that with the comparisons between sort of SpaceX and Boeing versus a traditional approach. But how you actually manage to manage risk in that for the end customer is quite an interesting parallel. And that's what we've seen. How do you take commercial capability, pace, small startups, take the good ideas, bring those into a point where we can put a quality assurance and security wrapper around it that satisfies capabilities that will be required for high-end for DoD and MOD. And that really is where we see ourselves sitting at the nexus of how we do that. In the US, we're seeing that move towards things like Forge, the future open resilience, operational resilience and ground evolution, where it's taken exactly that. It's taken those open approach, it's taking code low and open it up to a wider base as possible, and then deploy it on the high side in partnership with the end users. And that approach in the UK, we've done to a degree for our customers out in a cyber domain. We've done that within the UK in the ISR domain as well. So I think there are a lot of parallels we can bring into this. For me, the interesting thing is how do you do this in such a way that we're not mutually spending money and time in the same areas, and how we can deconflict that and actually bring that acceleration and new capability to the fore. So for me, this is really exciting, and trying to harness, as I say, the best of both sides of the pond is a great place to be.
Thank you, Paul. Mike, I might take it back to you and to kind of just, you shared a lot about the new initiatives. You shared a lot about what's been going on elsewhere and what you want to kind of factor in. I mean, Paul just mentioned how do you factor kind of the risk element of it? You hear about all these new and exciting ventures that Starburst is supporting, that Seraphim is helping with. Ms. Riles is talking about all the things they want to see more of, all the different. So how do you balance that in terms of saying, as we bring in these non-traditional partners to work with and these new initiatives that are being launched out of DSTL to support RAF and other elements of the MOD, where do you see, what advice do you have in how we kind of balance that risk with these new initiatives?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think we're sort of in the foothills of understanding some of that. I mean, I didn't mention this in my intro, but actually from a research perspective, our space research program within MOD has only been in existence since 2015. We took quite a long holiday in that sort of underpinning R&D, and we've been rapidly regrowing that. You know, we're up to 60, 70 staff now in terms of the work that we're doing. So we've been exploring lots of different ways from an S&T, a science and technology perspective, that we could work in the future. And for me, that's got to inform the likes of Group Captain Rayner here in how she does business in the future. It's got to inform the likes of ABM Harth-Smith and his Space Directorate about how well things are working. We talked about the International Space Pitch Day. It's a new initiative. We don't know yet how successful that's going to be. But we're certainly really keen to try new ways of working. And we can take more risk as a science and technology community in exploring these new initiatives. Then we've got to review them at the end, see whether they were successful or not, and see whether MOD wants to adopt them more wholesale into new processes. So, you know, I'm very much looking to be at the front end of taking some of these risks to see whether these things are going to be successful or not. And then it's up to wider MOD as we look at future capability, future ways of working, future ways of doing procurement with the agencies that are responsible for that, akin to SMC within the UK, to advise whether these should be adopted or not. I don't know if that really answers your question, but you know, we're very much exploring this space at the moment, I would say, and we haven't yet discovered whether these things are really going to work for us or not, but we've got to try.
Brilliant. Maybe someone's, I'll kind of pass that back to you to kind of just share about what is it that you feel are the most imminent areas that you want to be this much more, I don't want to call it experimental, but open-minded in being non-traditional with, and how you kind of, what programs you see, how you try to balance that in bringing that into an environment out of research, but more into an operational readiness.
Okay, so I think those on the call that know me will know I've never really been good at being traditional. So that's always a good starting point. And I think, as I always say to my US colleagues, for them, there's two sides of the coin. They've been doing space in a lot more detail for a lot longer time, which is fabulous. And they have a massive amount of experience, but they also have quite a large structure. Whereas we're quite lean because we're growing and we're starting. So we might not have that experience, but I would also argue we potentially don't have some of the baggage that if you press them a bit, they'd say, you know, if they were starting from now, they wouldn't structure themselves the way they are. Fabulous to see all the changes that are coming, and really excited with US Space Force colleagues of the way that's shaping up. But I think for me, having spent quite a lot of time admiring the problems and thinking about the future and thinking where it all fits in, we have a real opportunity in the UK. I would suggest that our linkages and connections across government, across academia, across industry are really, really strong. My linkage with Space Agency and Mike's, and you know, that cross-government linkage is really unparalleled anywhere else in the world. There's lots of good things going on, but we've got that small sort of agile opportunity. And I think we are instilling a bit more, I hope, of a flexible mindset in our leadership and elsewhere across the department that enables us to look out and see how can we consider potentially doing things differently. In terms of I've had a hand in setting up the challenges that we're talking about, and I'm linking those into the work we're already doing with US colleagues and some other nations as well. So very much the problem set we put out there links to our current programs and current thinking. And for me, I'm really interested and excited with the thought that there'll be somebody I would never have thought of reaching out to or considering that could come to us collectively with something really exciting. So I guess us Brits, we're known for being a bit clever about the way we think about things, generally because we don't have a lot of money, we don't have a lot of things, so we have to think everything carefully, which is why I think this approach fits with our sort of our national psyche, as it were.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on what the challenge areas that you consider a priority right now, that you get excited about? I know Mike and yourself might be able to touch on what are the challenge areas that you see exciting for anyone in the world to help you with.
So for us, I would say, you know, one of our challenges was actually narrowing it down to a small number, because we are feeling our way and thinking our way through how we develop a more comprehensive sort of space enterprise. we're not going to do everything in one full swoop. But I think really we want to know as much about as many different areas as possible. The areas we're specifically asking for the challenges focus around training and education, awareness, space domain awareness. But I would say that is just a part of the thought process that is going on within the department at the moment. Mike, have you got anything you want to add to that?
Same as with you, Raina, there's so many areas that we're seeking to get after. And actually one that's been quite on my mind that we've not talked about so much, but it's really relevant to COVID at the moment. It's about extreme space weather impacts, which is quite an interesting one, and a better understanding of the space environment and its impact on military systems. But, you know, space domain awareness, understanding how we protect and defend our space capabilities, our assets in the future, I think is going to be a really important one. And then one that we've got to better understand within the UK and across our partners as well. And certainly within the R&D community, you know, we're really interested in looking at novel kind of Earth observation or ISR technologies as well, to understand kind of where's the real points of interest of military utility that we can get after. And I think, you know, some of the stuff we're funding out of the DSTL program at the moment, I think is starting to get after some of those really interesting technologies, like radar, like hyperspectral imaging, etc. So I think, you know, more novel, more interesting sensor modalities as well in space is something that we're really interested in. But yeah, there's a whole range of stuff, and I think that's reflected in the challenges. That it's quite broad. Lots of things we need to get after as we seek to operationalize space, which is something we haven't really touched on today that much either. But, you know, space being declared an operational domain in the UK, and you know, I'm speaking to your area, Raina, of course. But, you know, how we develop, how we do the underpinning science and technology to support that transition over time, I think is really important as well. So lots to get after, exciting times.
Might before I go to Mark, Mike, I might just ask you to can you elaborate how, like, where companies can come from, that how the process works, like how you've worked with non-UK entities, and then maybe Mark, I'll kind of hand it over to you to kind of touch on how you think about investing in companies and how you start to do due diligence on ownership and where you see limitations around any kind of national rules and things like that. So maybe I just want to kind of talk about the challenge of borders or not in when you're trying to look after your sort of mission area.
So we're, you know, if we're putting out an open competition, we're not bound by borders, by national boundaries. I don't want to get into specifics of the pitch day competition. There is a competition document online. If I speak to it, I'm probably going to get it slightly wrong, but it's out there. There's a webinar next week. Please attend that if you're interested in the pitch day itself. I wouldn't want to give people a bad steer on any specific rules around that competition. But by and large, you know, from an R&D perspective, we're looking broadly. You know, yes, we're interested in UK companies, of course, but that doesn't mean it's closed to companies from other nations as well, applying into those processes. Very good.
Mark, I'll hand it over to you, kind of elaborate a little bit more on how you see that from an investor's perspective.
Yeah, well, space is a global business. So when we're looking to make investments, we're looking to invest into the best company within a particular market segment that's available around the world rather than from a particular country. What we're very driven by is understanding the needs and use cases from our corporate partners. And this is why I'm excited that the defense and intelligence market is really understanding that sharing their use cases and setting the challenges really helps investors like us identify where the opportunities are, so that when we see companies that match those areas, that they become more interesting to us, and those are the companies that we spend a lot more time on. Because guess what? As part of our due diligence exercise, we want to know who to go back and talk about the technology, the market opportunity, the competitive positioning, and what sort of price that they're willing to pay. And so finding companies that are matched against known needs is a really important thing for us to do. So when we're out making investments, we're looking for the best technology, the best management team with the biggest aspirations. And then we're trying to bring those companies back to the UK and seeing ways in which we can use the UK and the UK's talent pool, the UK's capital, the UK and European Space Agency's grant funding programs to really help support these companies.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. I want to echo that. We see the same. And I don't think it's just, I think that the corporations also, and maybe Paul, you can elaborate on this. You don't just look at it from a space mission area, but you also kind of look at adjacent areas in which the business is considering where there might be lessons learned. And so I don't know if you can touch on how you've seen the diversity of types of businesses, whether it's on commercial air traffic, not that you have experience there, but what lessons learned you might kind of bring in, and where you see that transferability or the duality of the use cases and advantages you see in bringing that into supporting, and as well as working with these early stage companies to bring them into this environment.
Thanks, Van. I think the biggest thing when you look across the different environments is actually the biggest problem is language, rather than any sort of technical issue, and it's culture.
Is that British English or American English?
Both. But also as you look across the use cases that Mark's describing, quite often the use case that you'll see out in the commercial business, commercial world or the civil side is the same as you've got in the military side. We're just separated by a language and a way of doing things. And on top of that, and by doing things, I mean also by culture. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for startups and SMEs into the defence sector, as opposed to being outside, is pace and timeline. So that's why this is an exciting venture to be looking at the moment, because quite often you'll end up with a call that comes out from one of the frontline commands or from the centre, from Mike's sort of area, and we're looking at innovation and we're looking for the ideas at the early stage of activity. In reality, innovation doesn't really happen until it's been delivered to the front line. So quite often it's not a question of the technology that you're seeing and what you can bring in from outside, but it's a question of how do you navigate the culture and the organisation that's within the defence market, and how do you actually find that you can work your way through that and meet the standards and the assurances that you need. And you can't do that on your own. So you have to work for and look at partnerships and use the heritage and expertise that you have with some of the bigger companies. That's what they're really there to do, to help and assure and bring and enable access to that, the good ideas, the early technology, the small startups, because actually getting the time and the ability to brief the likes of the people on the panel here is really difficult for a lot of the companies. And I think that's probably the hardest issue, is to meet a startup's aspiration for timeline to help them navigate the culture and the organisation and environment that is the defence market.
I really like that theme, and I don't know, Ms. Riles, if that resonates with you around translating culture. Maybe that's inherent to what you find in your day-to-day. Can you share a little bit more about some of the challenges or some of the benefits you've seen around not just culture in a nimble startup to a large enterprise, and lessons learned they bring to each other, the duality of civilian and commercial and defense, to also kind of working with other intergovernment agencies with foreign partners? Maybe I'm curious to hear how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a tough problem to solve. And I agree, a lot of it is culture, in just the way we do business, in the way we talk about the way we do business, in the way we're organized. You know, Group Captain Owens mentioned earlier that we are a big organization, especially on the US side of the pond, and trying to navigate that for large companies takes, millions of man hours sometimes and tons of resources, and those just don't exist for the small companies that are emerging into the market. So we're really trying to do a lot to encourage both a change in mindset and culture on the U.S. Department of Defense side to learn how to do business in a more commercial-like manner, and less traditional government, in so much as with the stand-up of the U.S. Space Force, one of the proposals that we've put forward is the idea that we need to go to an alternative space acquisition system, we need something new that's going to allow us to go fast, be agile, think differently, move differently. And it's something that is just not inherent within the U.S. Department of Defense. So we're working on that. General Raymond has been pushing that in every chance that he gets. It's something we put forward to Congress to start taking a look at that. So we realize that that's an issue, but we're doing a lot, I think, to try to bring people and companies into the organizations early, to talk to them, to use these things like pitch days to help educate non-traditional. I really was thinking as we were talking about this, we ought to get away from non-traditional to something like new traditional, right? Because this is a new way of doing business for us. It's a new traditional. It's going to become a new tradition for us to use these innovative companies and startups. So I think using these pitch days, using accelerator programs and opportunities to marry the government side of the business with the commercial companies and start to find that common language and start to understand the culture is going to be critical, both to educate both sides, to figure out how to do that. And now when you bring in the complexity of educating companies on how to do business with the United States government, the UK government, the Canadian government, the Australian government, you're really building that complex web, but it's something we all have a common need to get after that. So I think there's more that we've got to do coming together to make sure that can happen. I'd say from an international front too, as we stand up US Space Force, it's a beautiful thing to start a military service with a blank sheet of paper. And we're not taking what we've done for the last, couple hundred years and just rubbing out a few places. We're starting over from scratch. And that gets into the type of contracts that we want to use, the type of international agreements we want to use. I've been spending a lot of time lately working with personnel to change the way we do international agreements to make that more agile, much faster, so that we can link up our opportunity to work together with our closest coalition partners. And we want to do it in weeks and months and not, months and years that it takes us to do now. We're working together from a coalition perspective on Space C2 or Space Command and Control. That's an area that I think we're going to see a lot of, hopefully out of this International Space Pitch Days, some good ideas come that can help us collectively, move that forward. But we're doing that today. We're developing Space C2 capabilities today with agile DevOps software development. That's unheard of from the way we traditionally have done big space systems, I'd say with any of us and anywhere in the world. And so we have to put the tools in place to allow us to do that. We have to change the culture and the way we think about how we get after that. And we've got to educate everybody, both on the government side and on the commercial side. And we need a lot of help and translation in there, if you will, on how to have those common languages and that common discussion point. So
I really like that. And you talk about languages, and to many of us on this panel and others watching, they might be familiar with the Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, which is a lot of the contracting acquisition rules. And on the UK side, they call them the DEFCONs. And so we find these to not be inhibitive, but making sure that we're going around and we're being protective in how we bring in these new partners. But I absolutely agree with you. And I also agree it's not about just the commercial external partnerships, but what's going on internal. You talked about DevSecOps and I think what's going on with Space Force in particular. For those of you that don't know, the team is dubbed as Kobayashi Maru, which for supporting for software development, organic software development that the Space Force is building for its mission areas, is off base doing incredible things. For those of you that missed it, Colonel K, who runs that team, spoke on our panel 3 months ago when Dr. Roper opened. So you can also find that recording on YouTube. Maybe something else I want to kind of ask before we go into questions. One last question is, how has the pandemic, COVID, kind of affected your ambitions, what you're trying to achieve? Each of you has been on your own tight agenda. Each of you has reflected in how this environment has kind of shifted. I think the defense and space community, what I've seen, has not slowed down. And I'd be really curious to hear how you see that really pushing on your side. So maybe we'll kind of do it around, start with Mike and then go to Mark and Paul and Group Captain Reina.
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to COVID earlier, and I've been amazed at how well both our teams in DSTL, but also those doing contracts for us in industry have continued to deliver. You know, in March, April time, you know, it looked like everything was going to move to the right. It was going to delay a lot of our plans, a lot of the things we're trying to do. But actually, people have found new ways of working, new ways of doing business. And, you know, yes, stuff has slipped to the right. Things have moved a bit. And we've been as flexible as we can in those situations. And I'd like to think our commercial teams have been flexible where we're able to. But actually, I completely agree with you. It hasn't slowed down. People have found, you know, we've been cracking on with delivering our research portfolio. And it's been brilliant, actually. In fact, the one thing that suffered a bit was trying to launch this initiative, actually, and I was really keen that we launched it earlier in the year when I talk about the pitch day, and you know, that did suffer a little bit of a few delays, which were, I think, partly down to COVID, and some of that international partnerships as well, where we don't have access to the networks that we're used to and other things. That has made things more difficult. But again, we found new ways of working, new ways around it, and we've continued to move forward. So yeah, I've been really amazed, and actually I think it's set us up really well for growth, for moving forward, and we haven't slowed down. So yeah.
Mark Baji.
Yeah, so back in March, the things that I was really worried about was, a global shortage of venture funding for this sector, and that space tech companies would get treated differently to traditional technology companies in the portfolios of venture funds that have invested into them. And I'm pleased to report that, in fact, I'm going to share some numbers with you that show that the sector has been really very resilient from the total investment that's still continuing to go into the sector from the global venture community. So let me just throw a few numbers out here just to paint a picture. So I'm using figures from our index. So we produce something on a quarterly basis called the Seraphim Space Index. It covers space and UAV and drone global VC investment. And I'm quoting figures to the 30th of June to make this as relevant as possible. So in 2018, total investment was $3.3 billion. That 2019, $4.1 billion. In 2020 to June 2020, $4.3 billion. So what we've seen year on year is a significant increase at the early stage. So seed stage investment to the 30th of June is actually up 172%. A series is up 21%, B series up 55%. It's only in the growth stages that we've seen some setback. And even if you just look at the single quarter, so the quarter up to the 30th of June, seed was up 73%, A series up 56%. So this is showing a really great resilience from investors from this market. So I'm not trying to paint that this is a trend going forward, but it's far better than I thought it was going to be. And actually, what's really very interesting is that those statistics are broadly in line with what's going on with other sectors of the general venture technology investment, which suggests that that space isn't being treated any differently at all. There's also just painting the picture from the sort of UK and European perspective. So the UK has really been very consistently playing its position in the European market, investing into this area. So in terms of a number of companies invested, the UK is consistently around 40% per year of the European total, which is great because European investment is up 56% this year. So the US is actually down marginally, down 15%, whereas as Europe's up 56%. So the UK is in terms of number of companies backed is second only to the US. So in terms of numbers of companies in 19, the US accounted for 44%, with the UK accounting for 11%. And in this year to June 2020, US 46% and UK 13%. So that's pretty impressive, the UK sort of playing that position on a global scale. But the UK is really the heart of European investment. You know, on each year, the UK is investing more than Germany and France added together. We're about a third of all of the market. London accounts for about 10 billion investment a year versus New York, 14 billion, Beijing, 16 billion, and the Bay Area, 43. So there's a good reason why the UK is a place that's attracting many entrepreneurs that are coming into this sector that continue to be funded through this downturn. So I just wanted to share some, probably too much detail there with you, but it just these figures, we're really pleased to see just the resilience of the appetite of the global investors to continue to support this sector.
Thank you, Mark. I love it. I'm glad to hear you share those statistics. We are following it closely as well. Sometimes we can talk about that forever, but I don't like to think of it often in terms of the scale, but the frequency and speed in which some of these decisions are being made. And that's something else that we really follow pretty closely. But I am proud to see the growth in the UK, and that's one of the reasons why we're really excited to work with you and many other stakeholders that have been active there. And for me to come back to my old home and continue to grow and bring some of the successes we've seen around the world. So thank you for sharing those. Paul, maybe can you share a little bit more about how you've seen the market effect, where you are in the business, and how things are moving?
Yeah, I think echo what Mark said again. So really reassuring to hear that the investment is still coming in. I think without a shadow of a doubt, some of the bigger programs have been impacted, and that's natural. But it hasn't stopped us working. It hasn't stopped us moving forward and figuring out how we want to approach those markets. And in some ways, we developed some better relationships in this period than we would have done otherwise. For example, for Raytheon in Scotland, we have a new facility in Livingston that was an Industry 4 standard facility that's looking at space grade manufacture. We turned that over to the production of 6,000 ventilators to support COVID. So not only was that an enterprise for Raytheon UK, an opportunity to support, the partnerships we've developed in doing that, the ways in working that we've developed in doing that, has set us some real good markers for moving forward when we transition out and look at developing in new ways. In similar ways, where we've had existing partnerships, and it has been a difficult time for some of the smaller companies, we were able to take a role where I think the bigger companies should play in helping them get through that period. And I guess we won't be alone in this, but by accelerating payments to some of our smaller suppliers over the period, we've enabled them to survive that period. And also I'd like to pay a little bit of tribute to organisations like UK Space, which have been really active in garnering, you know, the feel and the impact of COVID on a weekly and fortnightly basis to help inform government on how the sector is moving forward. I think the way in which that's been done, the way in which we've been able to talk as companies, big and small, has really helped us come together a little bit more as a sector than perhaps we wouldn't have done otherwise. So in some ways, the pause has drawn the sector together a little bit, albeit we've had to pause. I mean, for us, we were just gathering some great momentum, having held a first in the US in February, which was the Department of International Trade and UK Space Agency UK Supplier Forum into the US that was running El Segundo by Raytheon with the full support of DIT. You know, and there were some 14 UK small companies that we were exposing the US market to and looking to develop those relationships. That slowed down a little bit naturally because we've lost that face-to-face momentum. But those are things that we'll just pick up as we go forward. And as we're not seeing any lessening in demand signal from the customers, it just means we're going to have a busy end of the year, you know, and we're going to have to accelerate and move quite quickly to satisfy some very hard taskmasters, Raina.
Thank you. Yeah, Raina, how, just before we jump in.
Yeah, I got a couple, if I may, Van, actually, to relate back to what a few of the other panelists have said. firstly, back to Deanna's point about traditional non and how we should talk about it. I was just looking in the dictionary, and I think unconventional something, because tradition is all about how we've done it in the past. So I absolutely agree we should get away from that term, and maybe unconventional is good. And then to her point about the Kobayashi Maru and the Space C2, in the UK, we're doing things on a smaller basis, but we are doing DevSecOps and agile software development for our Space C2 system as well. Early days for us, and we're starting out, and we've already exchanged some really good work with the team at SMC and best practice between us. So that's the two initials. Then COVID and how's that affected us? Well, interesting enough, my life and my team's life generally are out of the office more than we're in. And we spend a lot of time in the US. So the downside is we're not getting the time with our US colleagues, which I think helps us really build and cement strong relationships. Great though Zoom is, and the rest, it's not the same. However, on the other side, the team and I, we weren't phased when we went into lockdown because we're used to being on the end of a phone. We're used to working in that mode. So we had a really good period to start with. The rest of defense caught up with us. So we were having a really good time and had some really good thinking. The rest of defense kind of caught up with us now. And I think we've all switched into working remotely and working in a different way. So I think it's been really good to set our minds into being agile and flexible for the future, which talks to all the things we're doing here. Lots of people were saying, to talk to Mark's point, that, oh, this comes along, the venture capital will dry up, it's far too risky, people won't invest. So and while we have seen some casualties around the space world, in some of the launch folk and some of the mega constellation related things, actually it's really good to see that that isn't the case, and great to hear the statistics from Mark on the growth. I think we have finally, and it's been a long hard struggle, captured the imagination in the UK across government and folk for space. You've only got to listen to space mentioned in the manifesto this last year, and the current government are quite interested in it. And something that partners on the call may not be aware of, Space Agency today announced the launch of their new National Space Innovation Programme. So it's really good to see that there is such a vibrant set of activity in the UK. So I would, on balance, say it hasn't held us back. There have been some challenges in terms of getting onto systems we would normally do. I lead for our Combined Space Operations 7 Nations group, the capability working group, and we've managed to get people connected up from home in various locations across countries. And I think we are generally sort of richer for it. I would like to get back to the face-to-face because you can't really replace that. But I think it has set us in the right mindset to be agile and innovative, which is what we're after.
Thank you. I do concur that this has jolted a lot of our infrastructure into the modern age. So even though some of us have used to being on the road, at least we're better at getting connected out of the office. So with that, may I invite Lindsay back into the room to share some of the Q&A that we've been seeing online and let us know. And I think we've got 9 minutes remaining, so hopefully we can power through. Just for our panelists, please be mindful of the time left. We still have 177 participants left. So please, Lindsay, take it away.
Yes, thank you, Van, and thank you, panelists. That was a great discussion, and as Van mentioned, we generated quite a number of questions with only a few minutes left. So let's jump right into them. Our first question is open to anyone on the panel and is related to U.S. international traffic in arms regulations. And the question is, how will the UK get around U.S. ITAR issues, including ITAR taint, when the U.S. is investing in UK innovations?
Well, this is I don't think anybody wants to answer this one. I think this is a tricky one. But what I might do is say, we will host a separate webinar specifically about how to do business in the UK and how to do business in the US in the coming weeks. So please stay tuned and we'll make sure. I personally worked on developing ITAR regulations, and I think we are working to overcome those, and mostly in not looking at transfer of intellectual property. So I think as we get more and more unconventional and creative, I'll I'll invite for those of us that have those concerns to join the webinars that we'll be hosting in the coming weeks to learn more about how we work to overcome that. But if anybody else wants to add to that, please feel free to dive in.
All right,
No.
we'll go into the next question then. So the next question is also open to anyone on the panel. It says, this has been a great discussion on how the US and the UK can leverage technologies and resources for the common good. How does this desire extend further internationally? Is it a step at a time, or is there an interest to bring in other countries in the near term?
So I'll start with that one. Obviously, today we focused on that UK-US relationship, but I'm talking from the research arena, but we have many other relationships with international partners where we're looking to develop space capability. One of the ones we're working on at the moment is the Responsive Space Capabilities MOU, which is 11-nation MOU, so a number of European nations and the traditional Five Eyes partners as well. But that's just one other area, that there are many, and we're still quite a small program, small area within UK, and as that grows, we'll always be looking at new partnerships as well. But it's not just the US, it's not just the Five Eyes as well, NATO included in that too. So it is broad and it is growing, and I'm sure Deanna will add to that from the expanse of where the US are looking to.
Yeah, sure. I'll add that as we're building out the space enterprise architectures for all of the mission areas, a key tenet in every mission area that we're developing going forward includes commercial and allied aspects of it. So whether it's partnering together to develop and build something, or it's inviting allies into our US systems, or even conversely, us investing into international partner systems going forward, which is, again, something that we haven't traditionally done, but something we're looking to be unconventional about going forward. So you're going to see a much broader reach from the US DoD to look globally and find where are the best capabilities that are being developed. We want the best of the best wherever in the world we have to go and get them.
Thank you. The next question is directed towards Dr. O'Callaghan and builds off of the answer that you just gave, which was, how do you see the future Two Eyes, Five Eyes collaborations working together to build a UK global navigation satellite system capability?
Yes, I saw the GNSS question in the Q&A, and as you might expect, I will disappoint the person asking the question in that GNSS obviously is something currently led out the UK Space Agency in conjunction with our Space Directorate in MOD, and it's not really something that from where I sit within DSTL I'm able to comment on today. So I have to pass that one by, I'm afraid.
No problem. Moving on, the next question is open to everyone on the panel. What sovereign space capabilities are the UK looking to explore in the coming years?
I feel I ought to have a word on that one. So I think we covered it at the start. We're at an early stage of considering what across the space enterprise we want to do. There's a lot of work ongoing currently within the department, but I think towards the back end of the year in the autumn, we'll see a lot more information about where our next step is going. We've fairly newly stood up this Space Directorate, and they're taking a leading role in trying to sort of set the way ahead for the future. But we did cover, and Mike and I both said, in essence, we're both interested in everything. We just don't know how that will all rack and stack out and where the priorities the department will put on things just at this time.
I think we also need to mention to OneWeb for this question, the UK stepping up and taking a very significant stake in a commercial business like that. I'm personally excited about the impacts that has about what the UK plans for sovereign capability going forward. But if you just think about things like launch capability, supporting our UK manufacturing space capability that can feed into that, I'm really excited about the move that the government's already made.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. The next question is open to everyone on the panel, and it says, do you see R&D and prototype development budgets growing, getting smaller, or no change? Any thoughts on how the UK and the US economic turns have had effects on your innovation endeavors?
So yeah, I guess I'll start that question. Obviously, I can't. Again, we're in a you know, it's a difficult time at the moment because there are ongoing reviews within the UK, and I certainly wouldn't want to speak to or preempt any of that. But there certainly is there is certainly a significant interest in R&D. There's a significant interest in understanding what we can gain from space, the benefits, etc., to our economy. So I see it as an area of particular interest. So that is exciting for me, but I wouldn't want to preempt any of the ongoing reviews or activities within the UK at the moment by saying whether I think it's definitely going to grow or not. But it certainly seems one of those areas of technology that's really interesting, really exciting.
Yeah, and from the US side, I'd add that all of our major programs now have an element up front of prototyping and innovation as a primary way of developing new capabilities. So it used to take us 5 to 10 years to develop a major space program and get something on orbit. We're trying to get that down into 2 to 3 years or 2 to 5 years. And the way we do that is by doing a lot of prototyping, tech refresh, tech insertion before we get to that fielded system. While we're not waiting until we get 100% answer at the end. We want to innovate. We want to prototype. We want to do a lot of hosting of payloads and things like that in the very beginning of the acquisition system. So I think inside our budgets, we're going to see more of those dollars on prototyping and innovation up front.
Thank you guys so much. We have a ton of other great questions, but unfortunately, that's all the time we had for today. So I want to say a special thanks to all of our panelists for participating. A special thanks also to everyone in the audience for signing in to today. And before we close, I'm going to pass the mic to Van for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you again to our panelists. We're very excited about what's next. I think this is, as many of the panelists referred to, the beginning of many, many more initiatives in promoting open innovation, in not just looking at the growth of R&D, but looking at the speed in which acquisition and contracts is happening to these new market players. I think to emphasize on Deanna's last point, with the launch in the US of Air Force Ventures, we've seen companies scale from small bets to big bets in just under a year. What normally took a SBIR type process from many months to years is now really accelerated in time. So we're really excited to be a part of this. Starburst continues to support all the various stakeholders around the world. And thank you all. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Raina. And thank you again to Vice Commander General Cawthorn for providing opening remarks. Just as a reminder, next week, Starburst is hosting the Pitch Day with NASA. So for anyone who wants to follow and see who will be awarded capabilities in artificial intelligence, quantum sensors, and mass spectrometry, we're going to have also a panel of venture investors from the US, from Future VC, from Lux Capital, and from Venture University. We are also planning to have, as was mentioned separately, our International Space Pitch Day support with all the various our partners between the US and the UK. And for those of you that ask questions about how to get more involved, please visit intlspacepitchday.com. That's international abbreviated to spacepitchday.com to learn more about that process and the competition document itself that was published on the Defense and Security Accelerator website. Thank you again to our sponsor for making this event and previous events like this happen around bringing the leaders in open innovation across the aviation, space, and defense industry together. We are very proud to work with all of you. Thank you, Raytheon. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you, attendees, for joining. I know we had participants from most of the primes, corporate venturing arms, venture capital, government space agencies from Korea to other parts of Europe. Thank you all. And with that, I don't know, flash hands, jazz hands. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.